But let's cross back down to Canberra now and catch up with the Assistant Treasurer Michael Sukkar. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
Good to be with you, Chris.
Look, first up, I've got to ask you about the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. He had that horrible coughing fit delivering his statement today. After question time, he got medical advice. He's been sent off into isolation and to have a coronavirus test. We'll know the result tomorrow. What's your advice on how he's feeling and what the chances are that he could have been infected?
Well, look, I'm not a medico, Chris, but obviously, as the Treasurer said, out of an abundance of caution, he's got a test after he had a bad cough and a bit of a dry throat in the house. I mean, I've been working pretty closely with Josh over the last couple of months, and there's no one that's worked harder to try and steward this economy through this extraordinarily difficult time. I've seen up close just the sort of days that Josh has been putting in, the commitment, the dedication, physical and mental, that he's been putting into the job in very, very long days. So, again, I don't have any medical background, but I wouldn't be surprised if Josh is just a bit run down, given how extraordinarily hard he's worked for the Australian people during these last couple of months.
Well, I know he wasn't feeling well, and obviously he wanted to press on and deliver that statement. Why was the statement so important?
Well, we thought it was important, and the Treasurer very important, to outline to the Australian people where we've come, where we are now, and the sort of philosophies that will guide the path out of this terribly difficult time. So whether it was levelling with the Australian people about the fact that unemployment in the June quarter we're expecting to double to 10%, whether it's because we expect GDP to reduce by 10%, whether it was the increase in the budget deficit to the March quarter to about $22 billion, approximately $10 billion higher than was expected. Some of these sort of markers just to level with the Australian people of where we find ourselves now. But more importantly, the fact that we've been able to get on top of the health issues, I think, remarkably quickly and effectively, without being complacent, mind you, but the fact we've been able to get through that should give us great cause for optimism with obviously the other supports we've put in place, whether it's the JobKeeper payment, JobSeeker, cash flow for small businesses, direct support for households. We've cushioned the blow, but there will be another side, and we're, I think, almost in as good a position as any other country around the world to take advantage of what will be inevitable opportunities on the other side of this extraordinarily difficult time for the global economy, let alone the Australian economy.
But isn't Labor's criticism fair enough when they say, if you're levelling with the Australian public, give us your best estimate now at what the deficit will be for this financial year. Tell us now where you believe public net debt is going to peak, where unemployment will peak.
Well, Chris, we won't make the mistakes of Labor. I mean, we've seen, and the Shadow Treasurer was Wayne Swan's top advisor when he was Treasurer, and the Labor Party could never get any estimate right, any forecast right. They were hopelessly wrong. They projected full surpluses, we all famously remember.
Hang on a second. You predicted a surplus this year. Today was the day when you were supposed to be
Chris,
delivering the surplus.
Yeah,
so the question is, we've been befallen by this pandemic. No, Michael, we have been hit by this pandemic. Everybody understands that. But the question is whether or not you should give the public today the best estimates you have today from Treasury.
Well, if you let me finish my answer, Chris, I was going to say that if you compare what we're in now, even compared to then, can you imagine 6 weeks into this extraordinary pandemic with a long way ahead of us, a long runway ahead of us of this pandemic, the unreliability of those sorts of forecasts. So we've levelled with the Australian people of where we're at, where we think we're going. But, Chris, honestly, there's no point at this time in what is an extraordinarily unprecedented circumstance to be trying to provide those sorts of hard and fast figures. I mean, the Treasurer did outline where we'd expect business investment or dwelling investment or household consumption to go. There, we think, fairly robust figures, but we're not going to throw figures out there like Labor did that were plucked out of thin air. We will give prudent, forecasts of where we think the economy is going. That's what we've done to date.
All right, now,
and that's what we'll go in the future. And Chris, I don't think anyone would mark us down, quite frankly, for not predicting the coronavirus and the impact it's had on the economy and the resulting impact it's had on the budget.
I'm asking you only about best estimates now. And on that, given how well the country has suppressed the coronavirus pandemic, given we're ahead of where we hoped to be in terms of starting to reopen the economy, do you think you'll be able to pare back much of that budgeted spending? For instance, the $130 billion budgeted for JobKeeper, could you be pulling back tens of billions of that by getting people back to work sooner?
Well, no, we've put in place demand-driven programs. So the JobKeeper program is a demand-driven program. There was, again, a Treasury estimate. We expected about 6 million employees to access the scheme. I think we're close to 5.6 million people thus far, and that is still growing. These are estimates, but in the end, it's a demand-driven scheme. It's there to meet the demands of the economy at the time. Now, look, of course, Chris, with any government payment, we hope the economy rebounds as quickly as possible, but I think we've got to be realistic about it. We've put the JobKeeper program in place for 6 months with a 3-month review. I think our expectation is that's going to be required for that entire time, and all of the payments we've put in place are short-term in nature. Partly, Chris, because we can't go on spending $20 billion a month, for example, on the JobKeeper scheme in perpetuity. But secondly, we want to make sure that the support is there, whether it's support for households, support for small businesses, support for employees, support for people who can't get access to JobKeeper with a job seeker payment, that it's there for them when they need it, but that the budget bounces back as the economy bounces back, and we don't make the mistakes that Labor made, which was to bake in long-term expenditure to deal with a short-term crisis.
Just on parliamentary sittings, you've got another couple of days down there this week. Will you be detailing a sitting calendar beyond that so that Parliament returns as normal in, say, late July or August?
Well, I think the Leader of the House, Christian Porter, outlined today in the House that he expects to put forward a proposed parliamentary schedule, but there's nothing normal about this. And I think if you look at the federal parliament, we have met as often, if not more, than some of the state parliaments. But again, look, Labor always try to make this about themselves. Christian Porter, the Leader of the House, the government will have announcements on this. This is a pretty unprecedented time in every single way, including on the times that we sit and the way that we sit. But Labor trying to always make it about themselves, I think, is fairly unedifying. We're focused on the Australian people, on households, on small businesses, on people who are worried about and thinking about whether they will have a job at the end of this and what their job looks like at the end of this. That's our focus. And as I said, I think we have done the best we possibly can to facilitate unusual parliamentary sittings. And I think you can compare how often and how regular the federal parliament has met in comparison to every other jurisdiction around the country.
Michael Sukkar, thanks so much for joining us.
Good on you, Chris. Thanks.